Our normal venue up in this part of the state is under construction. With me, you'll hear from each of them in a few moments. The Superintendent of the State Police, Colonel Pat Callahan, explicitly here for, among other reasons, the Office of Emergency Management reports up to Pat, as you all know. To my left, another important leader, the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection, Sean LaTourette. We have Dan Kelly from our Emergency Services and Recovery team, who's been running it since Superstorm Sandy, I might add. Tim Hillman, Chief of Staff, among others, are with us. This is an unusual reason to gather as it relates to weather. You may look outside and see it's mid-70s, sunny. Tomorrow will be a little choppier in terms of weather, some rain expected. Thursday morning, maybe a little of that. And then beginning, if you believe the forecast, midday, Thursday through midday, at least midday, Sunday, will be some of the nicest weather we've had all summer, particularly Friday and Saturday. That's one data point that I'm sure folks are scratching their head about. The second one is that Hurricane Erin, as fierce as it is, based, I think, gentlemen, on all the modeling any of us have seen, National Weather Service, our own modeling, is going to miss us by a substantial amount, somewhere in the many hundreds of miles offshore. It could veer a little bit one way or the other. Sean should probably address that. But there's no modeling right now that we're seeing that is going to result in that storm hitting New Jersey. So just stop there for a second. Weather's not so bad. In fact, it's going to get really nice, and the storm's going to miss us. We are worried, therefore, in a big way about human nature and complacency. We've already had a very tough riptide summer, particularly over the past several weeks. Hard to tell, as we were just discussing, if that's any relationship with this storm. Probably not, I would guess. But we lost a precious soul in Seaside Heights. We lost a young girl in Belmar. And we've had stories all summer long of dangerous rip currents and rip tides. That will intensify to a very high level. In fact, it's intensifying as we speak. And secondly, wave heights, including onshore. Never mind the 40-foot waves that'll be several hundred miles out in the ocean. You've already got heightened levels on our beaches. I was in Long Branch yesterday, and you can see the ocean is quite angry. And those wave heights are now sort of in the 5, 6, 7 foot range. That will get into low double digit feet on I think Thursday, Sean, into Friday. And so just let's stop right there. This is no time to be complacent. I would just say to you flat out, don't go in the water. I don't want to be the Amityville mayor in Jaws, but the fact of the matter is I think going in the ocean for the next number of days is something you got to avoid. Not a whole bunch, but at least some Jersey Shore towns have already made that decision at their own beaches. Sean and we have made that decision for Island Beach State Park, which is the one shore beach that we control. There's nobody's allowed to go in the water. And that doesn't mean you can't enjoy the beach. You can't enjoy the shore. You can be on the beach, sunbathing, playing ball. We'll look the other way if you want to have a beer. Walk the boardwalks, go to the restaurants, have a great amusement parks. Remember, this storm's going to miss us. So it's other than tomorrow and maybe a little bit of Thursday, there's no rain involved. But we are hyper concerned, first and foremost, about complacency, particularly when the weather is really good Thursday afternoon through Sunday, in terms of people sort of thinking about going in the water, because these rip currents are brutal. If you're caught in one, again, I'd love Sean to add to this, and Pat, the advice is to swim parallel to shore. First of all, stay calm. They always say stay calm. Like when a bear shows up on your back porch, stay calm. Easier said than done, but in this case, try to stay calm and swim parallel to shore until the current sort of subsides, and then come in on a perpendicular to the shore. But please don't even go in the water. So that's our first huge concern right now. We'll keep you posted on ready.nj.gov, at GovMurphy on X. is another source, any of our statewide resources. The second concern is the potential for coastal flooding. And the word that we're using and that we use is moderate. Moderate does not mean a little. This means a potential for significant coastal flooding. There's a moment, I think it's Thursday night, guys, where the high tide will coincide with the high waves and the intensity of the impact of this storm. That's a particular period of concern, Thursday night into Friday. Sean will remind us that this also means potential flooding for the tidal rivers inland. But I think most of the focus or concern right now is on coastal flooding. So those are the double-headed reasons why we wanted to speak with you this morning. Again, ready.nj.gov, number one. Number two, just don't go in the water. We're about to get on a call with all the shore mayors and county executives, the three of us and Dan and Tim and others right after this. We're going to make the same point. I don't think it'll come to it, but if it helps, you know, we have the ability, we believe, to declare a state of emergency and have that blanket access to water up and down the entire Jersey Shore. I think we're seeing a lot of really responsible mayors take steps already. You've already seen some of that, Wildwood, Atlantic City, Seaside Heights, to pick three that have taken steps. But folks, please, please, please take this seriously. Particularly push back on complacency, on the human nature of, gosh, it's beautiful outside, let's sneak a quick dip in the water. This is not the week to do that. And if things change, particularly if they change for the better, we'll be the first folks to raise our hand and say, you know what, this was not as bad as we thought, and you should feel good. All the shore towns are really good, and I know Island Beach is really good with the flags and the red, the yellow, the green. You got a lot of red flags up this week. Again, that doesn't mean you can't have fun on the shore. This is one of the biggest weeks of the summer. But we cannot lose any more precious souls, and obviously we need to anticipate what could be meaningful flooding on the back end of this. Deep thanks for coming out. I'm going to ask Colonel Pat Callahan to say a few words, and Commissioner Sean LaTourette, and the three of us with the help from Dan and Tim and others will answer any questions you have. Colonel, come on down.
Thanks, Governor. And I'll just echo some of the Governor's remarks with regards to complacency. I know when people hear that it's not going to make landfall, that there's a sigh of relief, but although this will be mainly a marine event with small craft advisories, with certainly high risk for rip currents and certainly those swells, but that complacency is sometimes a deadly attitude to have. And I know especially those with surfboards are chomping at the bit to get down there, and it is not the time to do that. As excited as they may be about hearing about those swells, it is dangerous and it is deadly. Right now, that if you've seen, it's about 750 miles southeast of Cape Hatteras, down off of North Carolina, and it'll come up and make that, hopefully, that right turn that we're all expecting in those models. But that high surf, dangerous surf conditions. And we just ask that you be mindful of those red flags and listen to those lifeguards. My family and 4 grandchildren were at Point Pleasant 2 weeks ago, and it was a day like today, and we couldn't understand why they wouldn't let us in the water for 3 days straight. And if you've rented a house down the shore, there's still a lot of entertainment to be had without going in that water. And the reason we couldn't go in the water is because, just like the Governor mentioned, the 2 souls that we've lost this past week, because it is dangerous and it is hard to remain calm when you're in that situation. From a State Emergency Operations Center perspective, I've already been on the phone with FEMA Region 2 this morning. Our State Emergency Operations Center will be monitoring this along with the National Weather Service, who's been on this for several days. And again, to the Governor's point with regard to that word moderate, does not mean it's a slight storm. I think the combination of that high tide Thursday night with those gale force winds, they have not issued a gale advisory yet, but having watched storms for the last decade or so, I trust that gale advisory is coming. That too will impact the coastal flooding areas. So we will be monitoring it. We've constant contact with our county OEM coordinators and local county OEM or local municipal OEM coordinators, and to the governor's point, we'll be on shortly with the mayors that we anticipate having the greatest impact. So, always standing ready, certainly at the emergency management level. Thanks, Governor.
Thanks, Pat. I appreciate that. Pat mentioned the Outer Banks in North Carolina. There's some evacuations that are occurring there. You may ask, do we anticipate any here? I'm knocking on wood at the moment, we don't. But everybody's got to be smart. That would be more for flooding than it would be for don't go in the water reasons. So, Pat, thank you for your leadership as always. Again, please help me welcome another outstanding leader, Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection, Sean LaTourette.
Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us. As the governor and the colonel mentioned, the conditions along the shore are serious. Not only do we have Erin approaching, but we've been dealing with more localized wind conditions as well in the recent weeks, and certainly in the last 2 days, that have created or lent to an increase in that riptide occurrence. So as of this morning, we have closed Island Beach State Park. As the governor mentioned, that's the one state park that we have on the shore that folks can swim at. We've closed that to swimming, but as the governor mentioned, there is many great activities that you can enjoy while avoiding the swimming, and so Island Beach will be open for that. One of the things to be really mindful of here is as we expect the storm to move north and then begin moving more eastward over the next several days, the cone of influence for that storm, the way that its winds affect the tides, will extend west toward us by several miles. And so that is going to increase wave heights, right, up to some estimates put it around 13 feet above normal. And if you'd like to see what normal is and what actual recorded wave heights are, you can download the My Coast app, which is something the state offers for all of our residents, and you can see the activity at your nearest tide station. So I'd encourage everyone to do that, or go to My Coast NJ, where you can also see that same information online. The governor made an important point about tidal influence in our riverine communities, right? The Delaware River is tidal up to Trenton, and the effect of the tides on our river systems can increase flooding conditions in particularly urban communities that are far from the Jersey Shore, and that's something to be really mindful of. As we see 12 or more feet height in waves, we can see the coastal flooding conditions that we typically experience be exacerbated along the Atlantic coast and particularly along the Delaware Bay shore. But as we have tidal influence in the Newark Bay, up the Passaic River, and in the Hudson, we want to be mindful of those flooding conditions there as well. Between last Tuesday and yesterday, the DEP's Office of Coastal Engineering has conducted a pre-storm coastal erosion survey along all 210 miles of our coastal beaches, from the Raritan Bay beaches down the Atlantic coast and into the Delaware Bay, so that we can benchmark the conditions and the effect of this storm, so that if there is severe coastal erosion, we work with the governor and his team, including the Chief of Staff Hillman and Dan Kelly from the Governor's Office of Disaster Recovery, to work on potential funding if that's necessary. We hope it's not. But do please stay out of the water if at all you can. I understand how enticing it is. We work so hard to keep it clean and wonderful for you. But staying out of the water is your best bet for the next several days. It will peak on Thursday, or is expected to, but even as the storm moves further north and then east, we could still see the impacts of that wave increase and that wave action increase through the beginning of the weekend. So vigilance is key, and be going to ready.nj.gov as often as you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. I just want to underscore something that, Sean, thank you for that. Mentioned sort of places you wouldn't associate with the Jersey Shore. The three of us know all too well, our colleagues know all too well, some of the worst flooding and unfortunate tragic fatalities have taken place in our 8 years together. Different types of storms, admittedly, but in places like Elizabeth, or Irvington or Hillsborough, none of which you'd associate with the Jersey Shore. Again, different characteristics on those storms, but don't underestimate Sean's point about some of this coming inland. And then secondly, I hope I'm wrong, Dan, but I'll be shocked if we don't have some beach erosion here. And they're the usual suspects, and there are certain parts of the shore that we've been chasing our tail on for decades. Not too far from Island Beach, just north of that, Ortley Beach, Bay Head, down south in the Wildwoods would be two areas that are perennially challenges that we try to work with the feds and the local communities to do our best to push back on that. I hope I'm wrong about that, but with the nature that we're expecting, my guess is we'll probably see some of that. Pat and Sean, thank you. With that, we'll take any questions you've got.
Governor, could you speak to the challenges for first responders who would have to go out, assuming somebody were to wade into the ocean? What is the protocol there? Are first responders going out to rescue them? Is it all on the swimmer? They're on their own because you warned them not to go in? How does this work?
Yeah, I mean, you saw this, and I don't want to get into the specifics because there's loss of life, but one message ought to be screaming here: if there's a red flag, don't go in the water, and don't even think about going near the water if there's no lifeguard on duty. And we should have said that, so I'm glad you asked that. But their responsibility is to save lives. Absolutely. And at least one of these incidents that took place last week, gentlemen, if I'm not mistaken, there were a number of lives that were at risk, many of whom were saved, sadly and tragically. One was not. That reminds me to make a point Tim Hillman wanted me to make. We've gotten a very, very fair amount of input on bilingual communication, particularly in Spanish, on some of these warnings, which we are aggressively, Tyler and her team are aggressively pursuing. Anything else you want to say about first responders?
The Gov hit it. I mean, it's the lifeguards are the primary first line of defense, but our Marine Services Bureau are out there patrolling the entire coast. Our partnership with the Coast Guard has never been better. But that rapid response, it doesn't take all too long to lose life out there. And so, we'll be out there, I know that, but it's difficult to save lives once they've been pulled away in it.
You know, Sean mentioned that Island Beach State Park is open for business, but swimming there is not. And presumably you've got a whole army of people there, lifeguards and others, to enforce that.
Police officers.
Yeah, there's their own police force. They work closely with the state police, lifeguards, etc. Please. Good morning.
The young girl who passed away in Belmar, do we know if that's results of the riptide, or is that still one of the...
I think we should probably hold off on that. If you read the press, the overwhelming speculation is a rip current. But I don't probably shouldn't get into any of the specifics on that if it's okay.
Okay, sure. And then I just wanted, just an effort to get more specifics in terms of preparing. I know it's not expected to make landfall, but you mentioned, sir, that you plan on making calls to local mayors.
Yep.
Anything, do we know what that call is going to be about later today?
Yep.
Any other specifics?
Yeah, so we've already, it's not like we're waiting for this. This is a group call, but I've been back and forth with mayors, myself, our team, Tim and Rob Field, who's known to everybody, I think, in the state. I think there's no one in the state that doesn't have Rob's cell phone number, including one mayor that was mad at him, actually put it up on a billboard a few years ago. But we're in touch with these folks constantly. This is a group call that'll take place literally right after our gathering. Pat and Sean will be on with me, Dan and Tim and Rob, and we'll go through a lot of what we've just said. We'll probably raise more as an offer of help than bigfooting, whether or not it would help local communities' message against complacency if we were to come in and say there's no swimming on the Jersey Shore through X day. That's something we'll probably test with these mayors if they want that. We would still reserve the right, if we think even if they didn't want it, that we would need to do it. As Dan reminded me, we closed beaches during COVID, so we have the authority to do it, but that's something we want to talk to them about. I think we're going to plead with them to put the red flags up until further notice. Is that fair to say, guys? And to make sure their messaging is amplified by us, and that they can amplify our messaging as well, including you can still have a great time on the shore this week. Lots of pools. Again, it's a weird dynamic, admittedly. You're not going to have thunder, lightning, Might have a little rain tomorrow, a little bit into Thursday morning, but this is largely a good weather week. So there's really no restriction other than swimming in the ocean in terms of what you can do, and that's a message we want to make sure people get out. This is one of the biggest weeks of the summer. Thank you. Sir.
Governor, you said that you had the opportunity to close the beaches. Right now, you know what I'm with, we're thinking about what needs to happen in order that we close the beaches.
I think most of this, you should expect, I think most of this will be done at the community level. You're starting to see the dominoes fall. We've got a up and down the shore, whether it's county executives or shore mayors, an incredibly responsible group of leaders who we've worked with now for 8 years through thick and thin, including bad storms and COVID, to pick two examples. So I personally am optimistic that the right decisions will get made locally, and you're starting to see that as we speak. You saw Tony Vaz in Seaside Heights, for instance, very aggressively responding to the tragedy there. You've seen Wildwood, Atlantic City, I think now Asbury Park, Island Beach State Park. I hope that folks would look to us in terms of, at least to some extent, a role model on decisions on this. Sean, with our support, has made the decision to ban swimming at Island Beach State Park, which is our big exposure on the shore. That's a 10-mile stretch of beach, gorgeous, by the way. Voted a few years ago #1 state park in America. Had to get that in. So I would hope that, but if we think that in particular the shore mayors and county executives need help in amplifying and sort of strengthening the message that they're trying to deliver locally, we're open to helping them in any way we can, including a blanket step. Right now, my gut tells me we won't need to do that, but that's something that we at least have it on the table as an option.
And Governor, just to be clear, the timeline that's most concerning is Thursday night into Friday. Is that
You guys should come in on this.
Yeah, sure.
Although it's right now in terms of rip current.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, so the rip currents have been increasing in recent days, and we've had an experience growing over the last several weeks with rip currents in New Jersey or off our coast. As the storm makes its way, it's closest to or closest to us on that Thursday. So the effects are expected to be, the precipice at that point, right? But even as it moves further away from us, right, because it's going like this, right? It's making a bend. Even as it moves further away from us, the winds will still affect us. And so you can expect these conditions likely into at least the early part of the weekend.
The other thing that I think is worth repeating is what Pat mentioned. I think we all mentioned there's a particular moment that we're expecting Thursday evening with the combination of high tide, highest level of swells in terms of the flooding risk. So put aside the personal safety risk, which is acute. That's when we are most concerned about the potential for flooding. Again, ready.nj.gov. Please, folks, I'm begging you, take this seriously. Enjoy the shore. Enjoy this beautiful weather, but stay out of the water. Thank you all. Thanks, Nathan.